Keanu Reeves shoved his shoulder against the front bumper of the Bronco one more time and felt the rear wheels spin uselessly in the slush. The engine whined. The snow kept coming sideways. He stepped back, breathing into his gloves, and looked down at the rut he had dug deeper with each attempt to climb out of it. The truck was finished. He was going to have to walk. He had been on Bitter Pass for 40 minutes when the back end drifted onto soft shoulder and dropped 6 inches into a hidden trench of slush and gravel. The wind had picked up since. The pines on either side of the two-lane were now invisible behind a wall of white. His phone showed no bars. The truck's CB radio crackled with static and nothing else. He pulled his beanie down over his ears, zipped the flannel-lined jacket all the way up, and started walking back the way he had come. There was an old service station maybe a mile down the pass. Olson's Auto, closed since the bypass went in around 2009, but still since standing, the roof would block the wind. Anything was better than waiting in a stuck truck with no signal. He smelled the station before he saw it. Old motor oil, the kind that soaks into concrete and never quite leaves, mixed with something fainter. Wood smoke from a fire that hadn't been lit in years but had left its memory on the building. He came around the bend and the brick shell of Olson's Auto rose up out of the snow, 2 pump islands still standing, the canopy half collapsed under a winter's worth of weight. The hand-painted sign over the bay doors was barely readable now. Olson's. Tears Oil. Attention to detail. He was halfway across the lot when he saw the bundle. At first he thought it was a tarp. Wind had piled snow against the wall under the broken awning, and something dark was wadded into the corner where the brick met the foundation. He almost kept walking, then the bundle moved. Just a small shift, the way a sleeper turns under a blanket, and he stopped breathing. He covered the last 15 yards at a run and dropped to his knees in the snow. 2 children, the older one, a boy, maybe 15. Brown hair plastered flat under a thin gray hood, had his entire body wrapped around a smaller girl tucked against his chest. His own jacket was open and pulled around her like a second layer. His lips were the color of wet stone. The girl's face was tucked into the hollow of his neck. She wasn't moving at all. Hey! Keanu put his hand on the boy's shoulder, and the cold of him went straight through the glove. Hey, son, can you hear me? The boy's eyes opened halfway. When he saw Keanu, his arms tightened around the girl reflexively, even though he could barely move them. Don't, the boy whispered. Don't take her. I'm not taking anybody. I'm getting you both warm. What's her name? The boy looked at him for a long second, measuring something in a place a 15-year-old shouldn't have to measure things from. Wren, he said finally. She's 10. I'm Eli. She stopped answering me about an hour ago. Keanu pulled off his right glove with his teeth and pressed 2 fingers under Wren's jaw. The pulse was there, slow, faint there. He let out a breath he hadn't meant to hold. Eli. Listen, my truck is stuck about a mile up the pass. The truck has heat. There's a clinic in Coldwater. The woman who runs it knows me. Do you understand? Why are you helping us? It wasn't really a question. The boy said it the way someone reads a label out loud, to check that the words mean what they appear to mean. Because you're here, Keanu said. Let's go. He lifted Wren first. She weighed almost nothing. That kind of nothing that tells you something is wrong before any doctor does. He carried her 10 yards into the partial shelter of the bay alcove, laid her down on his own jacket, then went back for Eli. The boy tried to stand and made it halfway up before his knees folded. Keanu caught him under the arms. I can walk, Eli said, in the very controlled voice that meant he couldn't. You walked enough already. He carried the boy across the lot, then went back for Wren and put her in Eli's arms again, because some part of him understood that separating them right now, even for the time it would take to walk a mile in a storm, would be a kind of damage he had no right to do. He bundled both of them inside his jacket and started up the road, carrying them like one shape. The mile back to the truck was the longest mile of his life, and he had been a stuntman once. The wind hit his bare shirt sleeves through the flannel, and his fingers stopped working somewhere around the halfway point. He kept moving because the alternative wasn't an alternative. Twice he had to stop and adjust the bundle because Eli's grip on his sister had slackened. The second time, Eli's eyes locked onto his face. You came back for me. I thought you'd just send help. From where? Keanu said. The boy almost smiled. The Bronco was still nose down in the trench when they got back to it. Keanu put the children in the passenger seat and the footwell, started the engine, cranked the heat as high as it would go, and threw every blanket he had over them. Then he got out again with a tow strap and the shovel that lived behind his seat, because there was no help coming, and the truck wasn't going to dig itself out. It took 32 minutes. He dug, laid the floor mats under the rear tires, rocked the truck out in second gear. He did it all on autopilot, while his mind ran a single loop. Get them to Marlena! Get them to Marlena! Marlena Quill had patched him up 4 years ago when he had wrecked a motorcycle on a private road outside town during a film shoot. She ran the Coldwater Family Care Clinic out of a converted craftsman house on Linden Street, and she would open the door at any hour. When the Bronco finally pulled itself out of the trench, he climbed back in and saw that Eli was awake, watching him. "You actually shoveled," the boy said. "It's my truck." He pulled onto the road and pointed the Bronco downhill, headlights cutting yellow tunnels through the falling snow. He drove at 25 miles an hour all the way down, and kept one hand on Eli's shoulder, where the boy was leaning against the passenger door with his arms around his sister and his cheek against the top of her head. Around the third switchback, Eli said very quietly, like he was admitting something he had been holding for months, "Her name's Wren because Mom liked small birds. She said small birds were the toughest ones. She was wrong about a lot of things, but she was right about that." Keanu kept his eyes on the road. By the time the lights of Coldwater appeared in the valley below, the strung Christmas lights still up over the main street in February, because nobody in this town ever bothered to take them down. Wren had begun to stir. A small sound, half a breath, half a word. Her small frozen fingers closed around the front of her brother's shirt and held on. Marlena met them at the side door in flannel pajama bottoms and a parka, hair tied back in the fast way of women who have been woken at night before. She worked for 40 minutes without saying much, got Wren onto warm fluids, checked her for frostbite. 2 toes salvageable, listened to her chest. By 8:20 p.m., she pulled Keanu out into the hallway. They'll live, both of them. The girl was very close, Keanu. Another hour, probably not. He's worse off than he looks. They've been on the edge for weeks at minimum. How long can they stay here tonight? They can't stay here at all. This isn't a hospital. I don't have overnight nursing. I can call St. Pat's in Missoula, and they can come down with a transport, but that means CPS in the morning. Separate placements, probably. Machine starts up. Or, you take them to your cabin, I come up first thing tomorrow, and we figure out a humane way to bring the system in on our terms, not theirs. You do that. I just offered, didn't I? The cabin was 28 minutes up a county road. He had called Nora Mendel from the clinic phone. Nora ran the bakery on Linden Street. She had been the first person in Coldwater to tell him bluntly, 2 years ago, that she didn't care who he was in California. The croissants were $3.50 and the line started at the wall. He had told her on the phone only what she needed to know. He had 2 kids. They had been outside in the storm. They needed soup and a place that wasn't a hospital. She was at the cabin before he was. The porch light was on. Smoke was coming from the chimney. When he opened the door carrying Wren, Nora Mendel, 64 years old, 5 feet 2 inches, and built like someone who had lifted 25-pound flour sacks every day for 40 years, looked at the 2 children and said only, "Bedroom." Both of them. I made enough soup for the whole pass. The cabin had 4 rooms. He carried Wren into his own bedroom. Eli, when offered the daybed in the office, looked at the door between the 2 rooms and said, "Can I be in here with her?" Yes. Nora was already dragging the daybed mattress down the hallway. Together they set it on the floor next to Keanu's bed, so the 2 children would be at arm's length through the night. Keanu would take the couch. Nora would take the daybed frame. Nobody discussed any of this. It was just how the cabin sorted itself. Wren ate 3 spoonfuls of broth before falling asleep again. Before she fell asleep, Nora knelt beside her and pressed her own lips lightly against the girl's forehead for a count of 3. Keanu, watching from the doorway, understood that this was how Nora was checking the temperature, the way his own grandmother had once checked his when he was small. Because lips are more accurate than hands, and because some checks are also a kind of message. Wren did not flinch. Eli ate 2 bowls of soup before he started shaking in a way that had nothing to do with cold anymore. Nora put a hand on his back and didn't say anything. After a while, the shaking slowed. "I'm sorry," he said. I don't. You don't have to be sorry for anything in this house tonight. That's a rule. We can write it on the wall if you want." He laughed, once, wet and surprised. "You want to know what happened to us," he said to Keanu. "Only what you want to tell me." Our mom was Denise Whitfield. She worked 2 shifts at Stella's, the diner up on Route 200. She was 38. Our dad died at the Continental Pit in 2022. That's the copper mine outside Butte. The cable snapped on a haul truck. There was a settlement, but the lawyer took most of it. Mom worked the diner. Then she got sick. Then last March, she didn't come home from her 2nd shift. They found her in her car in the parking lot. The coroner called it heart failure, but... He stopped. She'd been telling me for a while that she was tired. I think she was tired in more ways than just the one. "I'm sorry, son. The state put me in a group home in Missoula and Wren in foster care in Helena. Different counties, different caseworkers. After 3 months, I hitchhiked to Helena, found Wren's placement. Walked up to the front door at 4 in the morning and rang the bell until somebody answered. The woman who'd taken her in, she wasn't a bad person. She was just overwhelmed. She said she wouldn't call the police on me if I left right then. I told her I wasn't leaving without my sister. She told me where the spare key to the side gate was, and she said if Wren happened to leave through the side gate before she came down to check, that wasn't on her. She left me $40 on the kitchen counter, too. I still have her number. I should pay her back." Keanu didn't say anything for a long time. He was thinking about the woman in Helena who had decided on her own authority to be a small good in a large system. "We've been moving since then. Lived in a parked Civic in Bozeman for a while. The Civic got towed in January, and the cash ran out, and I thought if we could just get to my dad's old hunting cabin on the other side of Bitter Pass, we'd be okay until spring. I had a key. I thought I remembered the way. I didn't remember the way. Eli, how long has Wren not been talking?" Eli looked at his sister. Even in sleep, her left hand was tucked under the covers and pressed against the side of her left shoe, which she was still wearing, because she had refused to let Marlena take it off. Since the 4th foster placement, about 4 months ago, she talks to me sometimes, not out loud. She writes things down on her hand and shows me. "What's in her shoe?" Eli's eyes went to his sister, then back to Keanu. "I don't know. She put it in there the day Mom died," I asked once. "She wouldn't show me. Whatever it is, it's hers. Then it stays hers." Around midnight, Nora went into the office to lie down. The cabin held the smell of pine sap burning slow in the wood stove, and Nora's bread proofing on the counter, the 2 scents braided together into something Keanu thought of, vaguely, as the smell of being indoors. Eli fell asleep on the mattress beside his sister's bed. Keanu stood in the doorway for a long time, and then he went into the main room and dialed a Los Angeles number from memory. Imogen Castello picked up on the 4th ring. He hadn't called her in 2 years. "Keanu, where are you?" "Montana. I need a family lawyer in Missoula by tomorrow noon, the best one you can find. And I need to know exactly what the law says about emergency guardianship of 2 siblings who left a foster placement 11 months ago and have been off the grid since." There was a silence then. "Tell me everything from the beginning," he told her. When he finished, Imogen said, "You found them tonight?" "Yes, and you've already decided." He looked through the doorway into his bedroom where the 2 children were sleeping in the dark. "Yeah, I've already decided. Then I'll be in Missoula by 10 in the morning. Don't talk to anyone about this until I get there, especially not the press. You understand why I'm saying that to you specifically?" "I understand." He hung up. The clock on the kitchen wall read 12:41 a.m. He thought about the woman in Helena who had left $40 on the counter at 4 in the morning. He thought about how many small good acts had probably gotten these 2 kids this far down a road that should have killed them 3 times over. And he thought then that maybe the only thing left to him tonight was to be one more of those acts. And then maybe a few more after that. As many as it took. Imogen Castello walked into the cabin at 11:17 in a long charcoal coat, knee-high boots crusted with road salt, and the same expression she had worn to every deposition Keanu had ever seen her in. Wren was awake, sitting up in bed eating a small bowl of oatmeal Nora had made with brown sugar and a little vanilla. She watched Imogen come in with a steady, careful gaze that took the lawyer in head to foot and then returned to her oatmeal. Eli was at the kitchen table, eating his second breakfast in 3 hours. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm Imogen Castello. Keanu asked me to come up because he wants you and your sister to stay together, and he thinks the law might listen if we ask it the right way. Would you tell me what you told him last night, but with more detail?" Eli looked at Keanu. Keanu nodded. Imogen worked with him for nearly 3 hours. She asked about every placement. There had been 4 for him, 3 for Wren. About dates, caseworkers, Denise Whitfield's medical history, the apartment they had lost, about money, about the workplace settlement. It was during the question about the compensation that Eli paused for the first time. There was a thing, after Dad died. Mom never finished filing for it. She told me once, before she got really sick, that there was 19,000 and change still sitting at the state's workers' comp office. She said she didn't have the energy to fight them for it anymore. Imogen wrote something down in a way that told Keanu the comment was important. "Does anyone else know about that money?" "Her brother might. Mom's brother, Roscoe Brannigan. He came around once when Mom was still working at Stella's, asking if she'd ever gotten the rest of the settlement. She told him no and asked him to leave. He didn't come back. I haven't seen him in 2 years. Last I heard he was in Idaho." The look that passed between Imogen and Keanu said everything. "Okay. I'm filing for emergency temporary guardianship in Missoula County District Court this afternoon. There is a caseworker in this region named Ansansel Crook. I worked a case with him in 2019. He's on our side. Try to trust him." Imogen left at 2:30. Wren was now sitting cross-legged in front of the wood stove with a pad of printer paper and one of Keanu's blue ballpoint pens, drawing with the focused private attention of someone for whom drawing was not a hobby but a language. Nora was making bread. Around 4 p.m. there was a knock at the door. Bertie Pancratz stood on the porch in a green parka, hood down despite the cold. She was 26, had been a reporter at the Coldwater Sentinel for 3 years. She knew Keanu the way everyone in Coldwater knew Keanu, as the guy who came in twice a year, drank coffee at the bakery, occasionally bought a fishing license, and asked to be left alone in a way that had earned him the town's protection rather than its attention. She held up both hands when he opened the door. "I'm not here to ambush you. Someone at the clinic talked, and someone at the gas station talked, and the story is going to run in the Sentinel tomorrow morning, whether you talk to me or not. I came up to give you the courtesy of a heads-up." Keanu stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind him. "What's the story going to say?" 2 unaccompanied minors found in severe hypothermic distress on Bitter Pass during the storm Tuesday night, brought in by a private party, currently in protective custody pending court action. "I don't have to put your name in it." "Why?" "Because you've never asked me for anything before, and because I've been a reporter long enough to know that the second a celebrity name gets attached to a custody case, the case stops being about the kids. You do that, leave my name out. If this case goes somewhere, if there's a hearing, if there's an outcome the public should know about because it matters to other foster kids in Montana, I get the story when it's ready. From you. First. Done." She nodded once, the way people do when a deal has been made that they don't intend to renegotiate, and turned to go. Halfway to the steps, she stopped. "The boy's last name." "Why?" "There was a woman last summer, Denise Whitfield. Died in her car outside Stella's. I wrote a small piece because nobody else was going to. She had 2 kids and the state had separated them, and I tried to find out where they went, and the system stonewalled me. I'd been thinking about her for 9 months. Bertie's voice was steady. "Just tell them, when they're old enough to hear it, that somebody at the paper noticed when their mom died. That's all." She walked back to her car through the snow. The Sentinel ran the story Thursday. No names. Page 3, 400 words, careful and dry. Bertie kept her word. But the story carried the word Whitfield twice. Once in a quoted line from an unnamed clinic source, and once in a parenthetical detail about Denise Whitfield's death the previous spring. Bertie probably hadn't meant for it to matter. To anyone who didn't know the family, it was just a last name in a small-town paper. To Roscoe Brannigan, reading the online edition 2 days later in a motel room in Coeur d'Alene because his cousin's wife had texted him a link, it was a starting point. He took a Greyhound from Coeur d'Alene to Missoula and a cab the rest of the way to Coldwater. He arrived on a Thursday with $38 in his wallet and a duffel bag and a folder of legal documents he had spent the previous week assembling at a public library. He started at the bakery on Linden Street. He walked into Nora Mendel's shop at 7:15 in the morning, ordered a black coffee, paid in singles, and said across the counter, "I'm looking for my niece and nephew. I heard they might be in the area. I'm their uncle. I came up from Idaho when I heard they were okay." Nora poured his coffee without expression. Whitfield's. Eli and Ren. She handed him the coffee. $2.50. He paid. He left. Nora locked the shop 10 minutes early that night, drove up to the cabin in her old Subaru, and walked through the front door without knocking because Keanu had told her 2 days ago that she didn't need to. "He's here." Tall 50-something bad teeth kept calling me ma'am like he was practicing it. He asked about the kids by name. Keanu was at the kitchen table with Eli, going over math homework. Eli had gone very still. "Roscoe," he said. Wren was on the floor in front of the wood stove again, drawing. She had not looked up when Nora came in, but she was holding the pen completely motionless against the paper now. Listening, Keanu went and sat on the floor next to her. He didn't touch her. He just sat. "Wren, nobody is taking you anywhere. Whatever he tries, whatever he says, you're staying right here." Wren did not look up, but after a moment, her left hand came out from under her drawing pad and rested for a second on top of Keanu's hand on the floor, and then she went back to drawing. The picture she finished that night, and pinned to the wall of his bedroom before she went to sleep, was a drawing of a truck on a snowy road at night. 2 headlights making yellow cones in the falling snow, and 3 small dark figures standing in front of the truck, holding hands. Underneath, in a child's careful printing, she had written one word. U.R.'s Roscoe Brannigan filed a petition for guardianship in Missoula County District Court on the following Tuesday. His attorney, a man named Glenn Halloran, the kind of lawyer who never saw a case he couldn't take a small piece of, filed motions for expedited hearing. Imogen filed a response. The court scheduled a preliminary custody hearing for Friday at 10 a.m. On Wednesday morning, Roscoe came up the cabin road on foot. He stopped at the gate, 20 yards from the porch, and waited. Keanu walked out alone. He left the door open behind him so Eli, at the kitchen table, would be able to hear every word. "Mr. Brannigan, Mr. Reeves." Ross had a thin smile. "I just wanted to introduce myself before Friday. Family ought to know each other. You've been their family for how long?" The smile twitched. "I had my own difficulties. I'm here now." "You're here 6 weeks after the workers' comp office reopened their mother's case. That's the part I'd want a judge to look at." "Are you sure you want a judge to look at it?" Roscoe's expression changed. Not anger. Something more honest. Tiredness. The look of a man who had hoped this would go easier. "You don't know my situation. You're right, I don't. Tell me." For a second, it looked like he might. Then his jaw set. "Friday, 10 o'clock. He turned and walked back down the road. That night, around 11:30, the porch sensor light came on. There was no one there. At 1:30, Nora called him from her house in town. "He came to my door. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps and called my name through the door until I turned the light on. He said I should think about what kind of person I want to be associated with publicly. He said that twice." "Did you let him in?" "I am 64 years old, and I have been threatened by better men than him. I told him through the door to leave my property within 30 seconds, or I was calling the sheriff. He left in 28, I counted. Keanu drove down into town at 5. He sat at Nora's kitchen table while she made coffee, and they wrote down everything she remembered. He took photographs of the snow in her yard, which still held the tracks where Roscoe had stood. By 8 a.m., he was at Imogen's hotel in Missoula, and by 9, Imogen had filed an amended motion that referenced witness intimidation and asked for a protective order. Before he left Nora's, she put a coffee in his hands, looked at him, and said something he would remember for years afterward. "Some people aren't ready to be loved yet, Keanu. You just keep showing up till they are. Both of those kids, the one you brought home and the one you used to be." He didn't have an answer for that. He left for Missoula. The hearing took place in a conference room on the second floor of the courthouse, the smaller civil hearing room, because it was a preliminary matter. Around the table, Judge Thaddeus Renfro, 61 years on the family bench. Imogen and Keanu, Roscoe and Glenn Halloran, Ansel Crook, the social worker, a court reporter. Eli was there. Wren was there too, with her drawing pad in her lap, sitting in a chair pulled close to Keanu's. Judge Renfro opened with a directness Keanu liked immediately. I want to hear the witnesses, not the lawyers today. Eli Whitfield, you're 15? 15, sir. Tell me in your own words what you want. Eli looked at his sister, then at the judge. I want to stay with Mr. Reeves. I've known him 8 days. I know how that sounds. But the last person who put a roof over my head and didn't ask anything for it in return was a foster mom in Helena, who let me take my sister back at 4 in the morning and never reported it. I don't have a lot of data on what trust is supposed to feel like, but I know it's not the kind of thing you ask for. It's the kind of thing somebody gives you and then waits to see what you do with it. Mr. Reeves gave it to me. I'm starting to give it back. Sir, he paused. Also, my uncle came to our friend Nora's door at 2 in the morning. He has not asked me a single question about my sister Ormsey since he came to Coldwater. He has not asked us if we're hungry or scared. The first thing he did when he got to town was go to my mother's friend's bakery and ask where to find us. Not ask if we were okay, just where to find us. That tells me everything I need to know about why he's here. Judge Renfro looked at Roscoe. He said nothing. Then he turned to Wren. Wren Whitfield, you are 10. I understand you don't always speak. That's all right. If you can communicate by nodding or writing or drawing, I will accept any of those. Wren nodded. Do you want to stay with Mr. Reeves? Wren nodded firmly once. Do you want to live with your uncle, Mr. Brannigan? Wren did not nod. She did not shake her head. She looked down at her shoes. Then she did something Eli had never seen her do. She bent down, untied her left shoe, took it off in front of everyone in the room, reached 2 fingers down into the toe of it, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the size of a square envelope, dirty, the edges burned black on one corner, the fold creases worn nearly through. She held it for a moment. Then she stood up out of her chair and walked the 8 feet to the judge's seat and held it out to him. Judge Renfro took it. He looked at Wren. She nodded at him. He opened it. The paper was a single sheet of lined notebook paper, folded in quarters. The right edge had been burned. Most of the writing on the page was still intact. He read it twice. He read it a 3rd time. His jaw worked. Then he looked up, first at Roscoe Brannigan, with an expression Keanu had not previously seen on a sitting judge, and then at Wren. Honey, did you carry this with you the whole time? Wren nodded. Can I read it aloud? Wren nodded. Judge Renfro put on his reading glasses. The paper trembled slightly. Keanu decided that was the room shaking, not the man. To my Wren, if you're reading this, I'm not there anymore, and I am so sorry, baby. The world got too heavy for me, and I couldn't carry it anymore, but I want you to know that you and Eli were never the heavy part. You were the part that was light. I am writing this on a Sunday morning, because last night, your Uncle Roscoe came to the door asking about Daddy's money again, and I told him no, and he said he would find a way, and I want you to know. I want both of you to know that if anything ever happens to me, you do not, under any circumstances, go with Roscoe. I have made a copy of this and given it to Pastor Morales at St. Teresa's. He has my paperwork. There is a woman named Imogen Castillo in Los Angeles who used to help families like ours when I lived in California before you were born, and I have written to her and asked if she could ever help. If she does, she's a good one. Whoever finds you, whoever ends up taking care of you, please, baby, please show them this letter. Tell them your mother wrote it. Tell them she said no. I love you forever, Bird. I love you and your brother forever. Mom, nobody in the room moved. Imogen Castillo was sitting completely still. Her hands were flat on the table. There was a single tear on her face she didn't appear to know was there. Counselor. Are you the Imogen Castillo in this letter? I am, Your Honor. I worked legal aid in Long Beach from 2008 to 2014. I had a client named Denise Whitfield. She was 22, and she was trying to leave a difficult marriage. I helped her with a protective order. I have not heard from her in 11 years. I had no idea she had written to me again. Did she? I don't know, Your Honor. I haven't checked. I will check this afternoon. My firm forwards mail from old client cases to a central archive. If she wrote, the letter would be there. The judge nodded. He turned to Roscoe. Mr. Brannigan, the letter your sister wrote names you specifically. It says in her own hand that she did not want you to be the guardian of her children under any circumstances. Do you wish to respond? Roscoe was looking at the table. The composure he had walked into the room with had drained out of him in the 8 minutes since Wren had pulled her shoe off. I'd like to confer with my attorney. You may. They were gone for 6 minutes. When they came back, Halloran began to speak in the careful, flat voice of a lawyer who knew he had lost. My client's position is that the letter, the authenticity of which will need a handwriting analyst to verify, does not on its own override blood relation under Montana law, and that— Stop! Judge Renfro put up a hand. Mr. Halloran, I am not going to entertain that argument. I have practiced family law in this state for 22 years, and I have never seen a clearer instruction from a deceased parent than the one I just read. The handwriting will be verified. I will stake my pension that it is real. Mr. Brannigan, your petition is denied. I am issuing a protective order that prohibits you from contacting either child or any party associated with their care, including Ms. Mendel, whose porch you stood on at 2 in the morning earlier this week. Yes, that is in front of me. Yes, I will be referring it to the county prosecutor. You will leave this courthouse and you will leave the state of Montana within 48 hours. The protective order I am setting at 5 years. Do you understand? For a moment, Keanu thought he saw something in Roscoe's face that was not anger but closer to grief. The grief of a person who had been making bad choices for so long he no longer remembered what the other kind looked like. Yes, Your Honor, Roscoe said. The judge took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Then he turned to Wren, still standing at the corner of the table. Wren Whitfield, your mother loved you a great deal. Is there anything you want to say to this court? Today is your day. I'll wait as long as you need. Wren stood for a long time, then she opened her mouth, and in a small, dry, unused voice, the first sound out of her in 4 months and 21 days, she said, "Don't let him take her." She pointed at herself. "Don't let him take her, please." Imogen turned her face away. Eli closed his eyes. Keanu did not move because he was not capable of moving. Judge Renfro folded the letter in half along the original crease, carefully, the way a person handles an item that has already survived a fire once, and held it out to Wren. He is not going to take her. Not today, not ever. I promise you that on the record. Mr. Reeves, you are granted emergency temporary guardianship of both children effective immediately. We will schedule the permanent guardianship hearing in 90 days. This hearing is adjourned. Wren took the letter back in both hands. She walked the 8 feet to Keanu's chair, climbed onto his lap. The way no 10-year-old who hasn't trusted an adult in 11 months climbs onto anyone's lap, and pressed the folded paper into his palm and closed his fingers over it. "You keep it," she said, just to him. "I don't need to anymore." The summer came late to the valley that year. The snow held in the high passes into the 2nd week of May. Then, overnight, the larch turned green, and the creek behind the property ran clear and fast, and Coldwater opened its windows for the first time in 7 months. Eli enrolled at Coldwater High and re-enrolled for fall as a junior. He was behind in math by about a year and ahead in English by half of one. His debate teacher, a woman named Mrs. Calliope Quintera, who had been on staff for 31 years and was famously hard to impress, called Keanu after the 2nd week of fall semester and said the boy was going to be one of hers. Wren entered 5th grade. She was a selective mute again for the first month. By Halloween, she was answering teachers in single words. By Thanksgiving, she had read aloud in class once, just one paragraph from a unit on owls, and her teacher had emailed Keanu about it. Wren did not announce the milestone. She came home, took off her backpack, drank a glass of water, and asked Nora if there was any of yesterday's sourdough left. Imogen Castello had, on the afternoon of the hearing, called her firm's archive and asked them to search for any correspondence from a Denise Whitfield. They had found a letter, postmarked April of the previous year, sealed, never opened, sitting in the unsolicited pile because Imogen had been on leave that month. It said almost exactly what the burned letter had said. Imogen flew it up to Coldwater the following weekend, gave it to Eli and Ren in the cabin's main room, and sat with them while they read it. Then she had taken the train home, alone, and Keanu had not asked her about that train ride because he understood it had not been his to ask about. The permanent guardianship hearing took place 93 days after the preliminary one. It was uncontested. Roscoe Brannigan had left Montana within his 48 hours and had not been heard from since, except for one item. In late April, he had filed a notarized statement with the Missoula County Court withdrawing any future claim to either child or to any portion of any settlement related to his sister, Denise. The statement was 4 lines long. The last line said only, "I am sorry I came up there." He did not give a return address. Keanu became, on the record, the permanent legal guardian of Eli and Ren Whitfield. The judge, Renfro again by the children's request, signed the order and then shook each of their hands. The cabin was too small for 3 people, but they didn't move. Keanu added a small bedroom for Eli on the backside, framing it himself over the course of 3 weekends in July. Eli worked on the Bronco with him through July and August. It needed everything. They spent 41 hours in the garage between June 1st and the day the Bronco passed inspection. And somewhere in those 41 hours, Eli stopped flinching when Keanu reached past him for a tool. Keanu noticed when it happened. He did not say anything about it. Some things were not improved by being noticed out loud. Wren went to a summer art program in Missoula 3 days a week, a small studio for kids who had been through what the program's director called the rough kinds of years. She came home each evening covered in different colors and with new techniques. Her work shifted that summer from the careful diagrammatic drawings she had done all spring into something looser and stronger. In September, Keanu sat down with Imogen and built something her firm could run. They did not name it after Keanu. They did not name it after the children. They named it the Denise Whitfield Letter Project. Its sole purpose was to provide free legal help to any single parent in Montana. And within a year, Idaho and Wyoming, who wanted to write what the lawyers called a guardianship designation letter, a simple document, a notarized statement of who, in the event of the parent's death or incapacity, the parent wished to be appointed guardian of their children, and who they did not. It cost nothing to write. It cost almost nothing to notarize. And in over 40% of foster placement disputes Imogen had researched in those 3 states, no such document existed because no one had ever told the parent it was an option. By November of the second year, 412 such letters had been notarized through the project. Wren held her first art exhibition at the Coldwater Public Library on a Saturday afternoon in late October. The library director, who had been planning a senior watercolor showcase for the same weekend, had moved her schedule to give Wren the main gallery wall. 19 of Wren's pieces hung there. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, more than 200 people had signed the door book. Wren stood by her largest piece, a 4-foot canvas in a dark green dress Nora had made for her. The centerpiece showed a Ford Bronco on a snowy mountain road at night, headlights cutting 2 yellow tunnels through fine-driven snow, and standing in front of the truck were 3 small dark figures, a man and a boy and a girl, facing toward the painter, holding hands. Behind them was the wreckage of a building under a half-collapsed canopy, faintly visible through the snow. In the lower right corner, Wren had signed her name. Above it, she had titled the painting in small, clean letters. What he saw, the proceeds from the exhibition, small donations dropped into a glass jar at the door, which added up to almost $1,400, went to the letter project. Bertie Pankratz wrote the story for the Sentinel 3 days later. The piece was 1,000 words. It told the story of Wren's exhibition, and of the project, and of a letter that had been written on a Sunday morning by a tired woman in a parking lot. The piece did not mention Keanu by name. The story was picked up by the AP Wire and ran in 14 newspapers across Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. The letter project received 673 inquiries in the month that followed. On the last Sunday of November, the 3 of them drove back up to Bitter Pass. The Bronco, running now like new, or at least like the kind of new that a 1986 truck on its 3rd transmission could run, climbed the switchbacks easily. Eli was driving. He had passed his test in September. Wren was in the back seat with a reel camera Anatole Bremer at the summer studio had given her for her 11th birthday in August. Keanu was in the passenger seat looking out at the larch. They pulled into the cracked asphalt of Olson's auto. The hand-painted signs was still readable in the right light. Olson's, Toil, Attention to detail. Wren walked up to the corner of the building where the alcove was. She didn't go all the way in. She knelt down where she remembered being and looked through the camera viewfinder and adjusted something and pressed the shutter once. The film advanced with a small mechanical click. She did this 6 more times from 6 different angles. Then she came back to the truck and put the camera carefully in its case. She didn't say anything about it. Eli watched her for a moment in the rearview mirror. Then he said, not to her exactly, just to the truck, she's gonna paint that someday. Not soon. Years from now. But she's gonna paint it. Probably, Keanu said. What'll she call it? Whatever she wants to call it. Eli put the truck in gear. They drove down the pass in the early afternoon light, and the larch was the gold color it only is in the second week of November. Keanu thought about a woman in Helena who had left $40 on a kitchen counter at 4 in the morning. He thought about a reporter at a small-town paper who had cared about a stranger's death enough to write 400 words. Nobody had asked her to write. He thought about a 64-year-old baker who had counted to 28 on her porch at 2 in the morning. He thought about a judge who had folded a letter back along its original crease because some things, having survived a fire once, deserve not to survive another. He thought about how many small good acts, performed by people whose names would never be known, had added up over the course of a year to 2 children breathing in the seats around him. Wren rolled the window down 2 inches in the back seat. The cold November air came in. She held her hand out the window, the way kids do, letting it lift and dip in the wind, and she said to the back of Keanu's head, in a voice that was no longer dry, no longer unused, "Can we get pie when we get to town?" "Yes, apple, apple," Eli said. "Always apple, always," Keanu said. 2 children survived a winter night because somebody got out of a truck. That is the only line of this story that matters. The rest, the names, the town, the burned letter, the courtroom, are stitched from how these things tend to happen. The kindness is whoever stops.